The Baalbek stones, ancient engineering beyond imagination. Breathe in, slowly. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw loosen. Feel the weight in your body sink into the bed, or the couch, or wherever you've chosen to rest. This is your time now, your quiet time. You don't need to rush anywhere. You don't need to think about tomorrow. Just be here, with me. The world outside can wait. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Is it a small warm room with dim light? A balcony with the wind drifting in? A place far away from the hum of the city? Let me know. I'm always listening too. Close your eyes if you wish and imagine this. The night is still. There's a soft mist that wraps around you like a shawl, cool but gentle. Somewhere in the distance you hear water, slow drops falling from stone to stone. You're standing at the edge of something you can't yet see. The air smells of rain on old rock, that sharp metallic whisper of earth that has known storms for 1,000 years. Ahead, in the faint silver light, shapes rise from the ground. At first, they seem like cliffs or the sides of mountains. But as you step closer, you realize they're not born of nature. They are made, shaped, placed. The stones rise higher than any tree around them. Their faces are weathered, but still hold the marks of hands. Hands that lived long before your time. They are not scattered like ruins. They are arranged with purpose. They're waiting for you as they have waited for everyone who has come before. The silence here is not empty. It hums. A deep, low vibration. Almost like the earth itself is breathing beneath your feet. You reach out, pressing your palm against one of the massive blocks. The stone is cool, almost damp. Your fingertips brush against tiny ridges, grooves carved so long ago you can't tell if they were made by tool or by time. You feel small. Not in a frightening way, but in the way you feel when you look at the night sky and realize how endless it is. The wind stirs, and with it comes a thought that is not entirely your own. These stones remember. No one rushes here. The pace of time around the Baalbek stones feels different, as if hours could stretch and fold in on themselves. Somewhere inside you sense that if you stood here long enough, if you listened deeply enough, the stones might tell you everything they have seen. But for now they keep their counsel, and you are left to wonder. The moon is low, resting behind a curtain of drifting cloud. Its light spills in silver ribbons over the edges of the stones, making them glow faintly. The air tastes of distance, that strange, clean emptiness you find far from cities, as though you're breathing in centuries themselves. You take a slow step forward. Your foot brushes over gravel, then rests on a slab of rock that's too perfectly flat to be an accident. More steps, each one bringing the stones closer, each one pulling you deeper into a place where the modern world feels impossibly far away. Somewhere above, a bird calls once, then is silent. Imagine yourself standing here as the first light of morning touches the horizon. The mist softens and the colour of the stones changes, from deep grey to a kind of muted gold, as if the sun is painting them awake. The world begins to stir, but still, it feels as though you're the only one alive. There's a pull to this place, not loud, not urgent, but steady. It's the kind of feeling that comes when you're holding a question you know you'll never fully answer. Why are they here? How were they made? Who carved them, moved them, lifted them? And why does no one tell the full story? The wind carries scents from far away. Warm earth, faint traces of pine, and something older, sharper, almost metallic. You think of the weight of these stones, the sheer effort it would take to move even one, and yet here they stand, perfectly aligned, stacked with precision, so exact you could barely slide a blade between them. There is a stillness to their presence, but not an emptiness. It is a stillness filled with meaning. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember a fragment of a story. That these stones have stood for thousands of years, longer than the empire that claimed them, longer than the memory of the people who built them. Empires rose, fought, crumbled, and vanished, but the stones stayed. Perhaps they were meant to outlast everything. Perhaps they're waiting for something, or someone. You run your hand along the corner of one block, feeling the strange warmth that seems to come not from the sun but from the stone itself. You imagine the generations that have touched this same edge, travelers, workers, priests, wanderers. The way your fingers fit into the same grooves they did, separated by hundreds or thousands of years, makes you feel connected in a way words can't quite hold. The mist shifts, revealing more of the site. You see the outlines of walls, platforms, and terraces. You sense that this is only part of what once was. The rest lies buried beneath soil and time, hidden from the world. The air grows still, and in that pause, you feel as though the stones are listening to you, just as much as you are listening to them. It's strange how something so solid, so massive, can also feel so delicate in spirit. Like if you breathed too loudly, you might disturb the ancient dreams resting here. You breathe quietly, you move slowly, you let the night, or perhaps it is early morning, wrap around you again. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asks, "How much of history have we forgotten?" And for a moment, the stones seem to lean in, as if they too are asking the same question. So you stand there, in the silence, the hum of the earth under your feet, the soft mist clinging to your skin, and you simply let yourself be. The questions can wait. The answers, if they ever come, will find you in their own time. Tonight, or perhaps in the distant tomorrow, they will whisper to you, if you're still enough to listen. And in that stillness, in that breath between moments, the journey into the heart of the Baalbek stones begins. Breathe a little deeper now, and feel the slow rise and fall of your chest, like a tide moving under starlight. The stones are still here with you, vast and patient, and the night is a soft veil around everything. Your footsteps are quiet, almost an echo of themselves, as if sound hesitates to disturb these giants. You run your hand along the surface again, tracing a faint line, and the question arrives like a moth circling a candle. Why do these blocks feel older than the stories that claim them? Why does the record sound so sure, and yet the stones hum with another tune? The wind slides over the edges, a low note, and the mist drifts apart and closes again, like curtains in a sleeping room. You are not rushed. You're not expected to solve anything. You're only asked to listen. Relax your shoulders. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on slow water. And still, the question returns, more insistent, more gentle. They have stood here for thousands of years. But why was their story erased from history? In the faint light, the ground opens to a broad terrace. You can sense the shape of a grand platform beneath the dust and weeds, as though a sleeping creature is hidden under a linen sheet. Here, the present tense holds you, steady and awake. There, in the near distance, the past rises like a warm breath from the earth. You picture a time when this was not ruin but center, not broken but bright. You imagine torches moving along the edges, shadows curling against the walls. A voice calls out, then another. There are names once written in clear letters, masons, priests, rulers, now softened by weather, by loss, by forgetting. Records suggest those names belong to an empire that claimed the site and dressed it in columns and marble. The official version says the Romans built here, raised a temple to a sky god, and filled the courts with processions. Perhaps they did. Perhaps they came upon these foundations and set their own dreams upon the older stone. That is the accepted tale. A grand project, planned over generations, measured by the emperor's will and the empire's wealth. You kneel and lay your palm flat on a seam between two blocks. It is tight, astonishingly so, as if the stones were grown together, as if time itself fused them. In the old books, this precision is praised, catalogued, placed neatly in the shelf of human achievement. And yet, even those books fall soft when they reach the lower courses, the parts that feel older, heavier, more stubborn. There is a gap, small but unmistakable, between what is said and what is felt. You breathe in that gap. The air tastes like iron and wet limestone, and the silence settles more deeply into your bones. You picture lines of workers in the past, men with ropes and levers and patience. The earth is packed hard for ramps, and timber creaks under weight. The official explanations point here to grit and geometry, to trial and error, to the slow force of many hands. There is comfort in that image, and it may be true in part. Yet the stones, these particular stones, seem to ask a different question with their vastness. They suggest a method that is not easily penciled into the margins. Not impossible, perhaps, but improbable, like a word that almost fits a sentence and then slides away. Now the mist lifts just enough for you to see a long edge, a corner that meets the air with clean certainty. You step along it, counting slow. The platform seems to breathe under your steps, steady and deep. You imagine the builders standing here at dawn, measuring with light, aligning some hidden intent with the first pale rays of the sun. Historians debate whether such alignments were by chance or design. The records are careful, the language measured. It may have been aligned, it may have been sacred, it may have been both. That is the nature of records, cautious and neat. But the stone is not cautious. The stone simply is, and its presence presses gently against your mind, asking you to feel rather than conclude. In your ear the wind speaks again, the same phrase it has always used. The stone, the shadow, the silence. A triplet that repeats as you move, as if the place itself is setting a rhythm for your thoughts. Stone, weight beyond imagining. Shadow, memory stretched thin across centuries. Silence, the space where all missing answers drift like ash. You keep walking, each footfall swallowed by dust, and you notice how your breathing has calmed. The body knows how to rest when the mind is allowed to wander, when the world stops insisting on sharp edges and simple timelines. There is a moment quiet, almost fragile, when the present and the past seem to sit beside you like old friends. The present says, "I am here. Feel the cool stone. Hear the small sounds of night creatures." The past says, "Once, this was a place of light and voices, and perhaps even before that, a foundation for something older still." Between them, the question settles like a feather. If an empire built upon an even older work, where did the first story go? Perhaps it was never written. Perhaps it was written and then unbound. Pages scattered by weather, by conquest, by the simple neglect of time. Or perhaps the stones themselves were meant as the archive, an enduring library without words. You pause at the edge of a drop where the platform meets the ground below. The fall is not sheer, but steep, and you can see broken fragments glinting like dull coins in the moonlight. The blueprint of the place is visible here. Courses upon courses, lines of intent layered like sediment in a slow river. You try to picture the beginning, the first time someone stood here and imagined shape into the formless rock. It might have been more than 2,000 years ago. It might have been far longer. The Orthodox record anchors itself to the empire. We know the names we can verify, the tools we can reconstruct. It is a careful anchor, and it keeps us from drifting into fantasy. Yet even with that anchor, there is drift, because the lower layers resist simple measures. They're too large, too seamless, too quiet about their making. You sit down on a weathered step and let your weight settle. The stone accepts you without complaint, as it has accepted so many. A moth turns circles around you and vanishes into the dark like a small thought finally released. In this calm, your mind turns to the small contradictions that are not scandals, but invitations. If it was merely Roman, why does it feel more ancient? If this was entirely mapped and measured, why do certain details still refuse to rest? If there was nothing before, why do the deepest stones seem to speak in an older tongue? The words arrive gently, without accusation. Historians debate. Records suggest. Perhaps, too, there were reasons for silence. Not conspiracy as a blade, but omission as a blanket, warm and easy to accept. Maybe it was simpler to tell a single elegant story. Empire, temple, decline. Maybe the strange parts, the heavy blocks no one could quite explain, were folded into the larger tale and smoothed over. One doesn't need malice to forget, only comfort. The mind likes order. The archive prefers clean lines. A guard writes what he is told. A scribe shortens a tale for speed. A storm takes a roof. A fire eats a shelf. Bit by bit the edges blur, and the stones inherit the burden of memory. The moon clears its cover and lays a pale path across the surface. You follow it to a corner where a faint groove runs like a scar. You slip your fingers into it. It is shallow, exact, almost like the trace of a tool that once knew exactly what it wanted. You imagine the hand that guided it, steady, practiced, patient. The picture is simple and human, and it is also vast. A person once stood here, breathing as you breathe, slowing their heartbeat as you do, working in rhythm with wind and light. The distance between you is measured in centuries, yet it has never felt smaller. You breathe together across time. The question returns, not louder, just clearer. If the stones have kept the deeper story, can we learn to read them? Not with hammers and scanners alone, but with a listening that respects both story and silence. You do not need to solve this tonight. This is a place for soft wonder, not hard conclusions. As the wind slides along the walls again, you hear the refrain. The stone, the shadow, the silence. The stone holds the weight. The shadow holds the outline. The silence holds the rest. You rise because the night asks you to keep moving. The path ahead is not straight, but it is kind. You will step through small pockets of air scented with herbs and dust. You will pass columns that no longer carry a roof but still carry a mood. You will feel the old world watching without judgment, and somewhere, just past your next breath, the mystery will open a little more. Not a storm, not a shock, only a slow unfolding. Like a hand unclenching after a long day, you relax your shoulders again. You let your jaw soften again. You let sleep walk beside you, even as your eyes stay half open on the stones. They have stood here for thousands of years. That much is certain. But why do parts of their story feel missing, softened, set aside? Perhaps the answer is simple. Time forgot. Perhaps it is complicated. Time was helped to forget. For now, we walk, you and I, with the question glowing softly in our hands like a lantern screened with cloth. We will carry it to the next terrace, where the accepted history waits to speak, and where the first cracks between record and rock begin to glimmer like stars. The wind gathers and settles, the mist breathes in and out, and the stones hum, enormous and calm, as if they know exactly how the story will unfold and are patient enough to let us learn it a little at a time. The morning is slow to arrive here, as though it too lingers in the stillness, reluctant to disturb the night's quiet breath. A pale ribbon of light edges the horizon, but the mist holds its ground, wrapping the stones in silver-grey secrecy. You keep walking, each step falling into the same slow rhythm as your breathing. Somewhere in the distance, the faint call of a bird reminds you that the world beyond these stones is waking. Yet here, time moves at its own pace. The body relaxes even more, shoulders drawn low, the jaw loose, every thought softened by the unhurried air. The next part of the story is the one they tell in classrooms, in neat paragraphs and measured tones. The official history begins in the age of Rome, a world of disciplined legions, marble columns, and imperial ambition. It is said that this place, now called Baalbek, was once a grand temple complex dedicated to Jupiter, the mighty sky god of the Romans. Construction, according to the written record, began around the 1st century before the Common Era and stretched for nearly 200 years. The emperors themselves, Augustus, Tiberius, later Antoninus Pius, were said to have watched over its progress. The columns that still stand, some of the tallest in the Roman world, were crowned with intricate carvings and shone in the sunlight. You pause near one of the fallen drums of those columns. It lies on its side, weathered but still carrying the delicate patterns cut by hands long gone. The Romans were masters of stone in their own way, skilled in engineering and scale. They built aqueducts that carried water for miles, amphitheatres that still hold sound perfectly, roads that have endured 2 millennia. It is easy to imagine their architects standing here, drawing lines in the dirt, plotting walls and courts with precise geometry. You can almost hear the rhythmic ring of chisels, the creak of cranes lifting the carved blocks into place. In the accepted narrative, the Romans transformed Baalbek into a centre of worship, a place where processions wound through vast courtyards, where priests offered sacrifices beneath the open sky, and where travellers from across the empire stood in awe. The temple to Jupiter was the crown jewel. Its scale meant to reflect not only the god's power, but the empire's reach. Beneath the columns, marble floors reflected sunlight, and in the air, the scent of incense curled upward in thin streams. Festivals filled the space with voices, music, and the clatter of sandals on stone. You lean against one of the larger walls now, closing your eyes. You can almost hear it. The faint echo of footsteps, the murmur of prayers in Latin, the slow chanting of priests. A flag flutters somewhere above, catching the sun. The official story is rich with such images, and they fit well into what we know of the Roman world. The historians have their sources, inscriptions, coins, fragments of sculpture, travellers' accounts. The narrative is orderly, grounded, and supported by the tools of their craft. But even as the story is told, a quiet question lingers. You open your eyes and look down, far down, at the lowest courses of stone beneath the Roman work. These are not the same. They are too large, too heavy, too old in their wear. The Romans built many wonders, but these lower blocks belong to another scale entirely. The official history says little about them. In most accounts, they are simply described as the platform upon which the temple rests, as though they were nothing more than a foundation prepared for later builders. You step closer to one of these giant stones. It rises taller than a man, and its length stretches so far that the eye has to follow it slowly. The seams between stones are tight, impossibly so, and the surfaces are smooth in a way that suggests careful shaping. If the Romans placed them, they left no record of how. No ancient writer mentions the effort, no carved relief depicts the process, and yet here they are, supporting the more recent structures with silent endurance. The guides who bring visitors here today will sometimes gesture toward them, acknowledging their size and mystery, but then return quickly to the safer ground of Roman history. The weight of these blocks, some estimated at over 800 tons, raises questions that official accounts are reluctant to follow. Moving such stones, even today, would require immense cranes, special transport vehicles, and precision planning. For the Romans, it would have been possible only with extraordinary resources far beyond what they typically used elsewhere, and so the records remain vague and the stones remain unexplained. You walk along the platform, tracing its edges. From above, the Roman temple is the clear focal point, but from here, at the base, the scale of the foundation is what commands your attention. The sense of age is different, deeper. The Roman stonework shows marks of their tools, patterns of wear consistent with 2,000 years. The larger blocks below seem older still, their surfaces softened as though they have endured not centuries but ages. The mind begins to wander. If these were not cut and placed by the Romans, then who? And when? The official record does not forbid such questions. It simply does not dwell on them. For archaeologists, speculation without evidence is a dangerous path. They must stand on the firm ground of what can be documented. Yet here, surrounded by mist and silence, the mind is not bound by the same rules. You can allow the possibilities to breathe, to stretch their limbs in the half-light. You can imagine other hands, perhaps far older, shaping these stones, aligning them with purpose, setting them in place long before the Romans arrived. The mist thins, and a beam of sunlight slips across the stones. It catches on a carved edge, one of the later additions, and glows briefly before fading. You think of time as layers, each one building on the last. The Roman temple is one layer, well documented, proud and strong in its day. Beneath it lies the foundation, another layer, older, less understood, and perhaps carrying a different story entirely. Beneath that, who can say? The earth holds its secrets well. You take a slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs, and you imagine the passage of centuries here. The Roman priests performing their rituals, the slow decline of the empire, the gradual fading of the temple's glory. Perhaps earthquakes shook the columns. Perhaps conquerors stripped the stones for other buildings. Perhaps, as the centuries passed, moss and soil began to reclaim what was left. Through it all, the foundation remained, silent and unmoved. It is easy to see why the official story focuses on the Roman period. It is a story we can tell with confidence, with names and dates and monuments that still stand. But standing here, looking at the massive blocks below, you cannot help but feel that the Roman chapter is only part of the book, and that the earlier pages have been torn out, or perhaps never written in the languages we know. The wind shifts, bringing with it the scent of grass and distant rain. You rest your hand on the warm stone, and for a moment you feel as though the earth beneath is listening. The Roman story is clear, ordered, and respected. But the stones beneath it speak in a different voice, one that has no need for ink or parchment, one that endures without telling everything. You look out over the terrace again, imagining the centuries layered here, the countless lives that have passed between these walls. The official history is a strong rope, but it is tied to something deeper, heavier, and still unseen. And you wonder, if we could follow that rope to its beginning, what would we find waiting in the shadows of the past? The mist begins to gather again, curling around the stones, as though to keep them hidden a little longer. You take another slow breath, letting your body sink into the stillness. The journey is far from over. Somewhere ahead lies the place where the accepted history ends and the true mystery begins. For now, you walk on, carrying the Roman story in one hand and the silent weight of the stones in the other, feeling the space between them grow wider with each step. The mist clings to the edges of the stones as you move deeper into the heart of the site. It curls like breath over lips, revealing and concealing in a slow, unhurried rhythm. Your steps are soft, and the ground here feels older beneath your feet, a subtle difference, like the change in tone when a song shifts from verse to chorus. The air is heavy with that deep, mineral scent of stone after rain. Somewhere in the back of your mind you realize that this is the moment where the clean, official history begins to loosen its grip, where facts blur into shadows and the stones themselves begin to tell their own, older story. You stop before one of the foundation walls, your eyes tracing the lines where the enormous blocks meet. The seams are perfect, tight enough to keep even the finest dust from slipping through. The Romans were master builders, yes, but even they rarely worked with stones of this scale. Here, each block could crush a modern truck beneath its weight, and yet they rest together like pieces of a puzzle carved by a patient hand. You crouch low, pressing your fingertips to the faint gap between two stones, feeling the cold whisper up your arm. It is not the chill of night or weather. It is deeper, older, the kind of cold that comes from centuries of untouched stillness. The official narrative speaks of a great Roman platform, a raised foundation meant to support the vast temple complex above. But there is something in the way these blocks sit, something that suggests they were not made for the Romans at all. They carry a wear that feels older than 2,000 years. The edges are softened in a way that hints at an age counted not in centuries, but in ages. You look up at the Roman work above it, fine stonework, smaller blocks, familiar proportions, and you can see it clearly now. The two are not the same language. They share the same page, but they speak in different voices. You walk along the length of the platform, each step tracing the boundary between what is known and what is not. Your hand rests on the stone as you move, as though you might catch a faint vibration, a story rising through the cold. The wind threads through your hair, carrying the scent of something green and far away. And in that moment, the vision comes, a time before the empire, before the marble columns, before the carved altars and incense smoke. A bare plateau, perhaps, and a people whose name we no longer know, moving stone like the breath of the earth itself. In this vision, there are no iron, cranes, no engines, no written scrolls. There is only the will to shape something vast and lasting, and the means to do so, a means we no longer understand. The sound is not the sharp chisel against stone, but something deeper, slower. Perhaps they sang to the stones, or perhaps they used a craft we have forgotten entirely. The vision flickers like candlelight in your mind, impossible to hold, but it leaves behind the feeling of presence. These foundations, it says, were not built for what stands above them. They had another purpose, one lost when the Romans claimed this place. Your steps carry you to a corner where the foundation turns sharply, the stones meeting with the same precision as if they were shaped yesterday. There are no marks to suggest how they were lifted, no scars from levers or ropes, no grooves from rolling logs. Theories have been offered. Massive ramps of earth, great teams of workers hauling the stones on wooden sledges, ingenious systems of pulleys and counterweights. And yet, nothing like that has ever been found here. No remnants of such ramps, no tools large enough to match the work. Only the stones themselves, silent in their perfection. You stand still, letting the questions gather. If the Romans inherited these foundations, then where did they come from? If they were built by a people before Rome, then why does history not remember them? And if they were made with some technology we've lost, what happened to it, and to the people who wielded it? The official record offers no answers. At best, it admits uncertainty, using words like possibly and likely, drawing a thin curtain over the unknown. You lean back against the stone and close your eyes. The cool surface behind you feels like leaning into the side of a mountain. You breathe in the stillness, letting it fill you. In the dark behind your eyelids, the image of the site changes again. The Roman temple fades away, and in its place rises something older, perhaps a platform for watching the skies, or a meeting place for a people who measured time not by seasons, but by the turning of constellations. Maybe it was part of a larger complex, now lost beneath the soil, its stones scattered or buried by the slow grind of the earth. A faint vibration hums through your back, or perhaps it is only the memory of the hum you felt earlier when you first touched the stones. It feels alive in a quiet way, like the deep pulse of the planet itself. You open your eyes and see the mist drifting low again, weaving through the gaps in the walls. The world beyond the stones feels far away now. You are wrapped in an older silence, one that has settled here for so long it feels like part of the structure. You think of the people who must have stood here before you, all through the centuries. Roman soldiers leaning on their spears, traders passing through on the way to the coast, pilgrims from distant lands. But even before them, who were the first? Did they stand where you stand now, looking at the same horizon, feeling the same weight of stone under their hands? Did they wonder if their work would last? Did they know it would? You turn and walk a little farther, stopping where the wall meets an open space. The ground here is scattered with smaller stones, perhaps fallen from above, perhaps once part of something now gone. You step carefully over them, feeling the crunch of gravel underfoot. The misparts just enough to reveal the far end of the platform, where the stones form a seamless face, each one fitted so perfectly that not even a blade could pass between them. You run your fingers along the join and feel nothing but smoothness, as though the stones themselves chose to fit together. It is in this moment that you feel the first real pull of the mystery, not just curiosity, but the quiet, steady pull of something unsolved, something that resists being measured or explained. You know the official account, the neat version told by guides and written in books. But standing here, the stones seem to smile at that version, as if they know a story far grander, far stranger, and are content to keep it until someone learns to ask in the right way. You close your eyes once more, letting the image of the past return. The sound of wind is replaced by the slow, deliberate sounds of construction, not with hammers and chisels, but with something more resonant, more attuned. Perhaps it is nothing more than your imagination, but here, in this stillness, imagination feels like a kind of truth. When you open your eyes again, the mist has thickened, and the edges of the stones are blurred. You know you have to move on to follow the path deeper into the site, where the mystery will begin to open further. But before you leave, you place your palm on the stone one last time, letting the coolness seep into you. The stone does not speak in words, but it leaves you with a feeling that the story of Baalbek began long before anyone called it by that name, and that the beginning is still here, hidden in plain sight for those willing to see past the surface. The wind picks up slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. You take a slow breath, letting your body stay loose, letting your mind rest in the knowing that not every mystery is meant to be solved at once. Ahead, the path leads toward the greatest of these stones, the ones whose size alone has made them legends. You step forward into the mist, ready to see what waits. The mist thins as you move, and the ground slopes gently downward, as if guiding you towards something it has been saving for this moment. The stones rise higher here, their surfaces catching the pale morning light in muted gold. You feel the earth beneath you grow firmer, as though each step is treading on the very spine of the mountain. The air is still cool, but there's a subtle shift, a heaviness that tells you you're nearing the heart of the enigma. And then, there it is, the trilithon. 3 colossal blocks, each so massive they seem less like something made and more like something simply placed by a force beyond ordinary reach. Even knowing the numbers does little to anchor them in your mind. Each block estimated at over 800 tons, each one longer than a city bus, higher than the tallest man. They lie side by side in a row, as if resting, their faces smooth despite the long centuries of wind and rain. From a distance, they could be mistaken for the natural cliff face of the mountain, but up close, their perfection gives them away. You approach slowly, the same way you would approach the shore of an ocean in the dark, respectful, cautious, listening to the quiet roar in your chest. The sheer size of them draws the mind into strange shapes. You imagine what it would mean to even move such a block, to lift it, to set it in place with this kind of precision. The Romans moved large stones, yes. Ancient Egypt too built with weight beyond reckoning. But this is something different. No crane described in ancient texts could manage it. No simple ramp could bear the load without breaking under its own weight, and yet here they are, fitted so tightly that the line between them is almost invisible. You place your palm against one. The stone feels warm now, as if it has kept the heat of 100,000 mornings stored inside it. Your fingers travel across its face, searching for marks, for any sign of the hands that shaped it. There are none. No chisel lines, no wedge marks, no scars from ropes or rollers. Just a quiet certainty of its presence. You try to imagine the moment of placement, what it must have looked like when the final block slid into its place, when the builders stepped back and saw the line complete. Was there applause? Silence? Did they know they had done something that would outlast every name they knew? The official explanation, when it is offered at all, is careful. Perhaps the stones were cut in the nearby quarry and rolled on logs to the site. Perhaps earth was piled high to form a ramp, and the blocks were dragged upward with ropes and the strength of hundreds of workers. Perhaps. But in all the perhaps, there is a gap, a silence that refuses to fill itself. No traces of such a ramp remain. No ancient drawings describe the process. And in the absence of evidence, the stones themselves become the only testimony, and they are not quick to answer. You step back, trying to see them as part of the whole structure. The trilithon forms one side of the massive platform supporting everything above it. Their alignment is flawless. Even with modern laser measurements, it would be hard to improve upon it. You picture them buried for centuries under the ruins above, hidden from all but the wind and the rain, waiting for the day someone would stand here and wonder. The mist moves again, curling round your ankles now, while the upper air clears. Sunlight begins to spill down, painting the blocks in amber. For a moment, they look like the walls of some ancient ship, a vessel anchored forever in the earth. And you can't help but think, maybe that's what they were. Not a ship for the sea, but for time itself. A foundation meant to carry something precious through the storms of history. In local stories, these stones were said to have been laid by giants. Some tell of a race that lived before the flood, being so tall and strong they could lift the earth's bones as easily as we lift branches. Others speak of gods descending from the sky, teaching their chosen how to work the earth in ways now forgotten. The Romans, when they came, may have found these stones already in place, may have simply built their temple upon what was already here, just as you might build a house atop an ancient, unshakable rock. You remember the name whispered by guides, the stone of the pregnant woman in the quarry nearby. Even larger than these, it still lies where it was cut, as though the work was suddenly abandoned. Standing here before the trilithon, you can almost feel the connection between them, as if this wall is only part of a greater design, one that was never finished, or perhaps only partly revealed. The mind reaches for answers, for patterns, but the stones give nothing away. You close your eyes again, and the image forms. A wide, open plateau in a time when the world was quieter, the air clearer. A people working with purpose, moving impossibly heavy stones, not with brute force alone, but with knowledge, a knowledge now erased from the record. You see no cranes, no timber scaffolds. You hear no frantic shouting, only steady movement, the sound of something sliding across the earth as though the earth itself wished to help. Perhaps it's just imagination. But here, imagination feels close to truth. When you open your eyes, the mist has almost gone. The trilithon stands in full daylight now, their shadows falling like the marks of a sundial. You trace the line of shadow with your eyes, wondering if it once marked a specific moment, a solstice, an equinox, the rising of a certain star. Many ancient structures did, and if these stones were part of something older than the Roman temple, perhaps they too were set to align with the sky. If so, then the temple above may have hidden that purpose, its own columns casting new shadows, rewriting the old script written in light. You step to the far end of the wall, where the trilithon meets smaller, later stones. The difference is stark. the transition from unimaginable scale to mere monumental. It's like stepping from a mountain path onto a garden wall. Here, the separation between paths is visible in the stones themselves. Two worlds, touching but not speaking, each holding their own silence. You wonder what it would take to truly read this place, not just in the language of archaeology, but in the language of the stones. Perhaps it would require standing here for years, watching the light move over them day by day. Perhaps it would require listening to the hum beneath your feet until you could hear its pattern. Or perhaps it would require something we no longer know how to do, a way of seeing that. We've forgotten, the way you forget a dream after waking. The air grows still again, and the world around you feels suspended. No bird calls, no wind stirs. The trilithon seems to draw all sound into itself, storing it for another time. You rest your hand on the middle block, feeling its faint warmth, and you realize this. These stones do not need to be explained to survive. They will be here whether or not we ever understand them. But we, the restless, questioning ones, may need to understand them to feel whole. You take a slow breath, letting the sight of them settle into you. The journey will take you beyond this wall, into the quarry where the largest stones still wait. But here, before the trilithon, you feel the deep pause of the story, the way a storyteller leans in, letting silence do the work before the next revelation. The stones, the shadow, the silence. The refrain comes again, steady and low. You carry it with you as you turn to follow the path toward the next chapter, where the largest cut stone in the world lies half buried, as if asleep, dreaming of the day it will finally take its place. The path from the trilithon curves downward along the edge of the hill, leading you toward the place where the stones were born. The mist has retreated almost entirely now, leaving only a thin, glowing haze near the ground. The air is heavier here, tinged with the scent of earth freshly turned, though you know no plough or shovel has touched this soil for centuries. As you walk, you feel a quiet anticipation growing, not the kind that quickens the heart, but the kind that slows it, deepens it, as if your body knows you're approaching something that demands stillness. The slope levels out into a wide open space, the quarry. It feels both empty and impossibly full. The ground is littered with fragments of stone, some no bigger than your hand, others large enough to serve as walls on their own. And then you see it, the stone of the pregnant woman. It lies in the earth like the hull of a ship stranded mid-construction, one end emerging from the soil, the rest still embedded in the bedrock. Even lying unfinished, it dwarfs the trilithon blocks. Archaeologists estimate it weighs more than 1,000 tons, and yet there is another, larger still, hidden just beneath it, discovered only in recent decades. The mind hesitates at such numbers, unable to quite imagine the weight, the size, the will it would take to bring such a stone into motion. You step closer. The sun strikes the exposed surface, revealing a pale, almost luminous texture beneath the dust. Your fingers brush the edge, smooth in places, rough in others, as if the work was interrupted halfway through. Was it meant to be part of the trilithon? Was it a replacement for a damaged block? Or was it intended for something even grander? A project abandoned before it could rise? The official explanations are careful here, as they always are. Perhaps the stone was left in place because of a flaw discovered during shaping, a crack, a weakness that would have made it useless once lifted. Perhaps the builders lacked the means to move it after all, their plans outpacing their tools. But these are suggestions, not certainties. And as you stand before it, the thought comes quietly. Maybe it was never abandoned. Maybe it was meant to remain here, exactly where it is, for reasons we no longer understand. You climb onto the lower side of the stone, feeling the warmth of the sun through your palms. Standing atop it, the world around seems to shrink. The quarry stretches outward like a shallow basin, ringed by low ridges. You can almost picture workers here, shaping blocks from the bedrock, the sound of tools echoing in the open air. But no matter how vividly you imagine it, the scene always feels incomplete, as if there is something missing from the picture, something that does not match the neat sequence of cut, transport, and placement. You kneel, pressing your ear to the stone. It is silent, yet not empty. There is a heaviness to its quiet, as if it holds the weight of more than just its mass, as if it is keeping a memory too vast to voice. Your eyes trace the lines of chisel marks still visible along the surface, wondering who made them and how many hands worked here before the work stopped. Did they know they were shaping something that would outlast them all? Around the quarry, smaller cut stones are scattered like notes around a central chord. Some are squared, others left in irregular shapes, as if the work here had been ongoing for many years. The absence of ramps, tracks, or ancient roads is striking. If the Romans, or any others, moved stones from here to the site above, how did they do it without leaving some trace? The earth keeps many secrets, but it rarely swallows everything. And yet, here, it has. You sit on the edge of the massive stone, your legs dangling. The view from here gives you a sense of the distance between this quarry and the trilithon above. A short walk, perhaps, but a journey that would have been impossible without extraordinary planning. The terrain rises sharply in places, narrows in others. It would be difficult enough to carry a block a tenth this size across it, even with modern equipment. And yet, those other stones are already there, resting perfectly in their place. Local folklore weaves other explanations. Some say the stone was placed here by the gods as a test for humanity, to see if they could ever muster the wisdom to move it without destroying themselves. Others believe it was cut in a single night by a giantess, who left it unfinished when she learned she was with child, hence the name pregnant woman. In such stories, the line between the earthly and the divine blurs easily, and the stone becomes a marker in a much older map, one drawn in myth rather than in survey lines. The sunlight shifts as you sit, moving slowly across the surface. You watch the shadows change, wondering if they align with anything in particular. Ancient builders often left such markers, a shadow that touches a certain point only on the solstice, a beam of light that reaches a hidden carving once a year. Could this stone, even unfinished, still serve some unseen purpose? A sudden breeze sweeps through the quarry, carrying with it the dry scent of stone dust. It lifts a few loose pebbles, scattering them in tiny arcs before letting them fall again. You think of time moving in the same way, lifting pieces of history, scattering them, then letting them settle in new shapes. What we call abandoned might simply be a part of a cycle we no longer recognize. You rise and walk slowly along the length of the stone, noting how the ground changes beside it. In some places, the bedrock shows signs of having been shaped for other blocks. In others, the surface is rough, untouched. The larger hidden stone beneath this one is invisible from here, but you can feel its presence, a deeper note beneath the one you can see, like the lowest string of an instrument you're only beginning to hear. Pausing at the far end, you look back. From this angle, the stone of the pregnant woman seems almost like a sleeping giant, its body half covered by the earth. It's not hard to imagine it rising, shaking off the soil, and walking away into the hills. You smile at the thought, not because it is likely, but because it feels no more impossible than the idea of moving it by human hands alone. The stillness here is different from the silence of the trilithon. There, the stones felt complete, set in place with finality. Here, there is an unfinished quality, as though the quarry is holding its breath, waiting for the work to resume. You feel that waiting in your own body, a slight tension in the chest that makes you breathe more deeply, as if to fill the space that time has left open. You step away from the stone, letting your hand trail along its edge one last time. The warmth lingers on your skin as you turn back toward the path leading upward. The air seems lighter now, as though the stone has given you permission to leave. But in your mind, the image stays, a block so vast that even the grandest human ambitions seem small beside it, lying quietly in the earth, a question that has outlived every answer we have tried to give. As you climb, the quarry falls behind you, its stillness closing again like water over a stone. Ahead, the path curves toward the upper platform, toward the temple ruins and the layers of history that still wait to be read. You carry the quarry with you, though, its unfinished song, its silent weight, and the feeling that somewhere in the space between human hands and impossible stone lies a truth we are not yet ready to hold. The climb from the quarry back toward the platform feels different this time. Your legs move steadily, but your mind is still heavy with the image of that enormous stone lying unfinished in the earth, like a half-written sentence. Each step seems to echo the same question: how? Not in the loud, impatient way the modern world demands answers, but in the deep, patient way the stones themselves might ask it. Not for an immediate reply, but to draw you deeper into thought. The air is warmer now, the mist burned away by the morning sun, revealing the full expanse of the site. The walls rise before you again, the trilithon holding its silent vigil. Above, the Roman columns stand like sentinels from another age, their carved capitals catching the light in fractured gold. You pause between them, letting your hand brush over their weathered surfaces. They belong to the known world, the one we can measure, date, and diagram. But beneath them lies the other world, the one that refuses to be neatly drawn in the pages of history books. Here is where the contradictions begin to show themselves more clearly. The official story is clean. The Romans arrived, saw the plateau, and decided to raise a temple complex unlike any other, dedicated to Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus. The architecture matches Roman design, the proportions, the column styles, the decorative motifs. But the more you look, the more the base of this temple feels mismatched. The massive foundation blocks are not just larger than anything else the Romans built here. They are larger than anything they built anywhere. The tools and methods they used in other great works do not quite explain these stones. You find yourself walking slowly along the seam where Roman and pre-Roman work meet. The line is clear to the eye. Above, the more familiar, carefully dressed blocks, smaller and lighter. Below, the seamless giants, their scale almost absurd in comparison. Standing here, you feel like you're looking at two voices layered over one another, speaking the same sentence but in different languages. The Roman voice is proud, declarative, full of power. It says, "We came, we built, we left our mark." The older voice is quieter, but somehow more enduring. It says nothing directly. It simply exists, vast and unmoving, as if to say, we were here before, and we will be hereafter. Archaeologists have suggested that the Romans reused an older foundation, adapting it for their own purposes, something they often did in conquered lands. But in most such cases, the older work was of similar scale, or smaller, or at least consistent with the technology of the time. Here, the opposite is true. The deeper you go in the structure, the larger the stones become, as though the oldest layers belong to a civilization with greater means than those who came after. This inversion of scale is not unique to Baalbek. It is found in other ancient sites around the world, in Peru, in Egypt, in parts of Asia. It's as though human history is not a straight line of progress, but a series of peaks and valleys where great knowledge appears, vanishes, and is forgotten. You think of the historians who walk carefully around these questions, aware of how fragile the accepted narratives can be. To suggest an older, unknown civilization is to step into a fog that few dare to enter, a fog where speculation is easy, but proof is scarce. And yet, the stones remain, physical and undeniable. They are the evidence, even if they refuse to explain themselves. The sun is higher now, casting sharper shadows. You stand in one of the temple courtyards, the columns around you forming a great frame of sky. It's easy to imagine this space filled with life. Priests in long robes, citizens gathering for festivals, merchants selling their wares at the edges. You can almost hear the sound of sandals on stone, the murmur of Latin prayers, the occasional bray of a mule somewhere beyond the walls. And yet you can also strip all that away in your mind, peeling back the Roman layer until only the platform remains. Without the columns and the marble, without the inscriptions, you are left with the original shape of the site, a massive, flat expanse of stone, raised high above the surrounding land, aligned with something you can't quite name. It could be a fortress, yes. It could be a temple. But it could also be something else entirely, something whose purpose we no longer have the language to describe. As you walk, you notice the way the platform catches the wind. It moves along the surface in long, unbroken currents, like invisible rivers. If you close your eyes, you can feel it moving past your skin, hear the low hum as it slides along the edges of the walls. You wonder if the original builders understood this, if they shaped the platform not just for what stood above it, but for how it interacted with the air, the light, and the seasons. At one corner of the site you find a place where the wall drops sharply to the land below. From here, the view stretches far, hills and valleys fading into the pale blue of distance. The sight makes something shift inside you. If this platform was meant to watch the land, it could see for miles. If it was meant to mark the sky, it had the perfect horizon. And if it was meant to endure, it has done so beyond even the wildest hopes of its builders. You sit there for a while, letting the scene sink in. The contradictions feel sharper now, but so does your understanding that contradictions are not always mistakes. Sometimes they are doorways, narrow ones, yes, but leading into rooms we would never find if the story were too neat. You remember the refrain that has followed you through this journey: the stone, the shadow, the silence. The stone is here in its weight and presence. The shadow is in the Roman work above it. The later story cast over the earlier one, and the silence. The silence is the gap between them, where no words have survived, only the enduring hum of something we still don't understand. The light shifts again, and you rise to move deeper into the site. You pass through a narrow corridor, the air cooler there, the sound of your footsteps magnified by the walls. Emerging into another open space, you notice a few scattered fragments, pieces of columns, carved cornices, blocks that once fit into something larger. They lie where they fell long ago, their shapes softened by weather. In them, you see both the fragility and the endurance of stone. It can be broken, yes, but it can also last for ages beyond memory. Somewhere beyond these ruins, beyond the limits of what we see, lies the question that drew you here in the first place. Why was the older story erased? Was it forgotten naturally like a path overgrown with grass? Or was it covered deliberately, hidden under layers of new meaning so thoroughly that it would take centuries to uncover again? You take another slow breath, letting the air fill your lungs completely before releasing it. The wind carries a faint sound from the village below. Voices, laughter, the clatter of something being moved. Life goes on, as it always has, while the stones keep their watch. You walk back toward the center of the platform, feeling the ground steady beneath you. The Roman temple may be in ruins, the columns broken, but the platform stands as firmly as it ever has. Whatever the truth of its origins, whatever story it once told, it was built to last. And in that endurance, there is a kind of answer. Not the one you came for, perhaps, but one that feels no less important. That some works are made not to be fully understood, but simply to exist, to anchor the world quietly beneath the passing of centuries. Ahead, the path will lead you to the place where theories converge and diverge, where scholars' explanations meet the more daring, speculative ones. You will hear of ramps and rollers, of lost technologies, of civilizations erased from the map. But for now, you stand in the meeting place between what we know and what we can only feel, and the air here is so still, so clear, that for a moment you believe you could stay and listen forever. The afternoon light falls softer now, as though it has learned from the stones how to linger without haste. Shadows lengthen slowly across the platform, tracing lines that might once have been markers, telling the hours, the seasons, or something far older, now lost to our calendars. You walk to the far edge of the site where the walls give way to a sloping expanse, and from here you can see the land roll away in all directions. Villages rest quietly in the distance, their white walls catching the sun, their narrow streets winding in patterns only their inhabitants can read. It's a gentle scene, the kind that makes you breathe deeper, as if the air itself is a gift. Here is where the stories start to slip from history into legend. You lean against the wall, feeling its faint warmth, and recall what the locals have said for centuries, that this place was built not by the Romans, nor even by the hands of ordinary humans, but by giants. The oldest tellings say that these beings walked the earth before the great flood, before the world was remade. They had strength beyond measure, and could lift stones as easily as a child lifts a loaf of bread. Some say they lived in peace, using their gifts to build places of beauty and harmony. Others tell of war among them, a conflict so fierce that it brought an end to their age. The mist of the morning is gone, but in your mind you can see it return, curling around the feet of these imagined giants as they walk the plateau, carrying stones the size of houses on their shoulders. You imagine the sound of their footsteps echoing through valleys, the low murmur of their voices like distant thunder. Whether they existed or not, the image clings to the stones here. woven into the air by generations who needed a story grand enough to match the scale of what they saw. You step away from the wall and follow a path that circles the perimeter. The ground here is uneven, scattered with fragments of carved stone. Some bear patterns that seem Roman, others more abstract, weathered beyond recognition. You crouch to examine one, a curve too precise to be random but too eroded to reveal its meaning. It's like holding a word from a language you can't read, a word that might once have been part of a poem or a prayer. Farther along, you find yourself standing before another stretch of the massive foundation. The lower stones here are darker, their faces smoothed by centuries of wind. You run your palm across them and think of the legends again, not just of giants, but of the first people. In some versions they came from the sea, in others from the sky. They taught those who lived here how to shape stone, how to align it with the heavens, how to listen to the earth's hum. Then they left, vanishing as suddenly as they had appeared. There's an ache in such stories, a longing that goes deeper than simple curiosity. It's the ache of knowing that we may never truly understand where we come from, that the ground beneath our feet holds more past than we can ever uncover. The stones carry that ache well. They do not rush to answer, and they do not seem to mind that we ask. You stop beside a broken column, its base still fixed firmly in the platform. You imagine it whole again, rising into the sky, crowned with the intricate patterns Roman hands carved, and then you imagine something else. The platform without the column, bare and open, its only adornment the sky above it. In that version, the space feels different, older, more like a place of meeting or watching than a place of worship. Perhaps the Romans built here because they too sensed the importance of the spot, even if they no longer knew the original purpose. The sun shifts again, sending a thin beam of light along the seam between two colossal blocks. The brightness makes the join almost vanish, as though the stones are fused into a single body. It strikes you again how deliberate everything here feels. These are not random alignments. Someone, long ago, decided exactly where each block would rest, how each face would meet the light. Local folklore speaks too of sounds that can be heard here on certain nights, a low humming or a deep vibration in the ground. Shepherds tell of hearing it when the moon is full, their flocks restless without cause. No scientific study has confirmed such a thing, but standing here, you can almost believe it. You felt something like it yourself, a subtle, bone-deep hum when your hand rests on the oldest stones, as though the earth beneath is speaking in a language too slow for human ears. You walk toward the far end of the platform where the view opens to the mountains. The light is fading now, giving the scene a gentler tone. The wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke from the village below, and you imagine the same scent rising here thousands of years ago, from fires lit by people whose names have been erased. There is a peace in that thought. We spend our lives chasing permanence, carving names into stone, writing them on parchment, but the stones of Baalbek remind you that permanence is not the same as memory. A name may fade, but the work endures. Even stripped of its builders' identities, the platform still holds its place in the world, still draws people to wonder at it. You find a place to sit on the edge of the wall. The drop below is steep, but from here you can see the land stretch out in every direction. The golden light of late afternoon softens the edges of everything. For a long while you simply sit feeling the stone beneath you, the air on your skin, the slow turn of the earth. When you finally rise, you take the path back toward the center of the platform. The shadows are longer now, stretching across the stones like fingers reaching for the past. You pass a group of smaller blocks stacked at odd angles, perhaps moved in some later repair. They're ordinary by comparison, but even they carry the patina of centuries, the stories of giants, of first people, of gods descending from the sky. They live here alongside the official history. They are not erased by it, nor do they erase it. Instead, they layer over one another like translucent veils, each one changing the way the others are seen. You think of it as you walk. The official record is one veil, the folklore another, the unspoken mystery another still. Through them all the stones stand unchanged, letting us look, letting us guess, but never lifting all the veils at once. As the day begins to dim, you feel the same quiet pull you felt this morning. The invitation not to solve, but to listen. You hear it in the wind moving along the platform, in the way the light touches the highest column before slipping away. The stones, the shadow, the silence. The refrain follows you again, a rhythm as steady as your own heartbeat. You pause once more at the center of the site, looking toward the hills where the sun is sinking. Tomorrow the light will fall differently, the shadowed will draw new shapes, and the questions will be the same. That is the way of this place. It holds the mystery not like a locked box, but like an open book written in a language we have forgotten how to read. When you finally turn to leave, the air has cooled, and the first hints of evening mist are returning. They drift low along the stones, as if the giants of legend are walking here again, their steps hidden in the slow breath of the earth. You carry the stories with you as you step away, the ones history accepts, the ones it doubts, and the ones it does not dare to tell. All of them belong here. All of them are part of the truth the stones keep for themselves. The air has cooled into that quiet balance between day and night, when the wind softens and the first shadows of evening settle into place. You move along the path that dips slightly toward the outer edge of the platform, where the land falls away into a gentle slope. Here, the light is thinner, sliding in at an angle that makes the stone surfaces glow faintly, as if they hold their own hidden fire. The voices of the village below rise in the distance. Faint laughter, the bark of a dog, a bell ringing somewhere. But up here, they seem far away, as though the plateau exists in its own time. This is where the largest mystery rests in plain sight, the one that archaeologists and engineers alike come to see. The sheer dimensions of these blocks are one thing. The precision with which they are placed is another. You pause beside one of the great foundation stones, leaning in close to the seam where it meets its neighbour. It's a join so precise you could barely slip a sheet of paper into it. No mortar, no visible filler, just two immense masses of stone meeting so perfectly that they seem almost fused. The official record calls them building blocks, part of a retaining wall. And yet, something about the way they fit together feels different, almost as though the builders were less concerned with building up than with locking something in. Perhaps it is nothing, a trick of perception. Or perhaps, as some suggest, the stones were part of a larger structure beneath, an unseen chamber or core that the Romans simply built over. As you move along the wall, you feel again that subtle vibration under your feet, not enough to shake, but enough to notice if you're still. You pause, closing your eyes. The sound of the wind fades into the background, replaced by a sense of depth, as if the earth beneath is speaking in long, slow syllables. You remember the shepherd's stories, the ones about a low hum that moves through the ground on certain nights. You wonder whether you're imagining it, or whether you've stumbled into one of those rare moments when the past still breathes into the present. It is here, standing against this ancient wall, that you begin to see the shape of another possibility, not one of giants or lost gods, but of ancient knowledge that worked with the earth itself. Some theories speak of harmonics, of using sound to ease the movement of heavy objects. There are tales from other parts of the world, Tibet, South America, Egypt, where such methods are whispered about, though never confirmed. If it were true here, the evidence would have long vanished, leaving only the impossible stones as a clue. You walk on, tracing the length of the wall until it meets a corner. Here, the late sun casts deep shadows into the joints, and you can see where one block extends far into the structure, locking the others in place. It's a design choice that speaks of foresight, of builders who knew that the greatest threat to their work would not be time, but movement, earthquakes, shifting soil, the slow creep of the mountain itself. They built as though they were building for eternity, and in some ways they were. A bird cuts across the sky above you, its shadow gliding over the stone for a brief second before vanishing into the open air. That shadow makes you think again of the alignment of things here, the way the walls and corners might have been chosen not just for stability, but for the way they interact with the sun and moon. Many ancient sites were designed to mark celestial events. Perhaps this one was too, its original purpose long overshadowed by the temple that came later. You step back from the wall, scanning the horizon. From here, you can see the line of mountains in the distance, their peaks now catching the orange glow of the setting sun. The platform is high enough to command a view of the land for miles in every direction. If this was once a place of watching the heavens, it had everything it needed. Clear sight lines, a solid base, and a permanence that has outlasted nearly everything else. As the sky darkens slightly, you feel the air grow cooler on your skin. The change is subtle, but it brings with it that same sense of being between two worlds, the known and the unknown, the past and the present. You sit on a smaller block nearby, letting the stone's warmth seep into you while it still holds the day's heat. From this low angle, the massive wall rises above you like the hull of a ship frozen in place. In your mind, you trace the possible lives of these stones. First, quarried from the earth, perhaps shaped in ways we no longer understand, then moved somehow to this place, set into position with perfect precision, buried beneath layers of history, their surface unseen for centuries, then uncovered again, examined, puzzled over, photographed, measured, and yet, for all that attention, still not fully explained. It's a life that stretches across thousands of years, a span so vast that even the most detailed human records feel small beside it. You rise again, walking slowly back toward the centre of the platform. As you pass another section of the wall, you notice a faint discoloration along the lower stones, darker streaks that seem to follow the natural grain of the rock. Perhaps it's just the work of water over time, or perhaps it's the ghost of some ancient treatment, a way of sealing the surface that has only partly survived. The thought stays with you as you walk. The evening light has turned golden now, casting long shadows between the remaining columns. The ruins are quiet. The last few visitors have drifted away, leaving you alone with the stones. You stand in the centre of the space, letting the quiet settle. The official history and the alternative theories swirl together in your mind, neither pushing the other away. They coexist here, just as they do in the minds of those who come to see this place. Fact and possibility, record and legend, each holding its own truth. In this stillness you realize that the mystery of Baalbek is not just about engineering or history, or even the scale of the stones. It is about the way all those elements combine to create a feeling, that rare, quiet awe when you stand in the presence of something so far beyond your own time that it seems almost alive. It's a feeling that does not demand an answer, though it invites the question. You turn once more toward the wall, letting your eyes travel along its length. The setting sun touches the top edge, throwing the lower stones into shadow. The contrast is sharp, like the difference between what we know and what we cannot yet explain. The Romans left their mark above, someone else left their mark below. The space between them is where the truth hides, patient as stone. The air grows cooler still, and the first hints of evening creep across the plateau. You take a final slow breath, feeling the rhythm of the place settle into you. The stone, the shadow, the silence. It will follow you into the next part of the journey, where the search for answers will begin to give way to the acceptance of mystery. And as you step toward that next chapter, the wall behind you holds its place as it always has, unshaken, unmoved, and waiting. Evening has finally taken hold. The sun has dipped beyond the mountains, leaving only a pale band of gold at the horizon, and above that the sky deepens into the kind of blue that seems to have no bottom. The air cools more quickly now, carrying with it the faint smell of earth and stone that has been warming in the sun all day. The ruins around you begin to change, their edges softer, their colours muted. The day belongs to sight, but night belongs to sound and feeling, and you can sense that Baalbek holds as much in the dark as it does in the light. You walk slowly across the platform, your footsteps a muted rhythm on the worn stone. The columns are now only silhouettes against the sky, their carved details hidden in shadow. Somewhere far below, a dog barks once, then again, before falling silent. The wind here is gentle, more like a slow exhale than a gust, and as it passes, you hear the faint rattle of leaves from a tree clinging to the outer wall. This is the hour when the past feels closest. The quiet strips away the noise of the present. No tour groups, no cameras, no explanations, spoken aloud. It leaves only you, the stones, and whatever memory they still carry. You stop at the edge of the trillathon again, letting your eyes trace the massive blocks in the dim light. In the shadows, their seams are almost invisible, and they seem to merge into a single unbroken wall. And then a thought surfaces, one that has been there all along, waiting for the right stillness to rise. What if the reason these stones seem beyond their time is because they are? Not in the sense of being simply old, but in the sense of belonging to a time that runs parallel to ours, touching it only briefly. Some believe Baalbek was abandoned suddenly, not in the slow decay that marks most ancient sites. There are hints in the archaeological record, abrupt breaks in construction, layers that suggest long pauses before the next stage of building. You remember the unfinished stone of the pregnant woman in the quarry, lying half cut as if the workers simply vanished. It's easy to imagine an earthquake or an invasion stopping the work, but the silence in the historical record feels heavier than that. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel it. A shift, not violent, but decisive. People leaving, tools set down, fires left to burn out on their own. Perhaps they thought they would return. Perhaps they never could. And in their absence, the earth reclaimed what it could, hiding the lower stones in soil and grass until someone else came to claim the plateau centuries later. The idea of a sudden ending fits into a larger pattern you've seen before, in ruins on other continents, in stories passed down through generations. Ancient cities abandoned mid-task, tools left behind, walls half-built or mysteriously altered. There's a rhythm to it, as if the earth itself has a cycle of erasing and resetting, giving humanity a new start but leaving just enough behind to spark questions in the far future. You open your eyes again, and the first stars are appearing overhead. Their light is faint but steady, and you realize that this place, high and open as it is, must once have been an incredible place to watch the night sky. The Romans had their own reasons for building here, but perhaps they inherited more than just a platform. Perhaps they inherited a site that was already aligned to the stars, already bound to the turning of the heavens in a way they could sense but not fully understand. The wind shifts again, this time from the north, cooler now. It brings with it the faintest trace of moisture. Not rain yet, but the kind of scent that makes you aware of the clouds gathering far away. You draw your hand along the nearest stone, feeling the faint pits and ridges worn into it. The touch grounds you here in the present, even as your thoughts drift to centuries long gone. You think about the fragility of human records, how easily a story can be lost when its keepers vanish. We imagine that writing secures the truth forever, but what is forever in the scale of these? Stones? A fire? A flood? A single generation that chooses not to remember, and the record is gone. The stones outlast all of it, holding their own version of history, wordless but enduring. As you walk toward the far end of the platform, you pass through a narrow section where two walls form a kind of passageway. The darkness here is deeper, and for a moment you lose sight of the open sky. You can hear your footsteps more clearly, the sound bouncing back from the stone on either side. It feels like a place made for transition, not a grand entrance but a quiet one, meant for those who knew the way. When you emerge again into the open, the night has settled more fully. The skies are deeper blue now, almost black, and the stars are sharper. You look up and realize how many of them there are, scattered across the darkness like grains of sand. The air here is clear enough that you can see the faint milky band of the galaxy stretching above. It is easy to imagine that the original builders stood here too, looking at the same sky, drawing their own maps in its shifting patterns. And you wonder, if they had mapped the stars from here, what would they have seen? The sky changes slowly over the centuries as the Earth's axis shifts. The constellations we know are not exactly the ones they would have known. If the platform's alignment was chosen to mark a celestial event, perhaps it was one that is no longer visible in the same way today. That thought makes the site feel even older, as though it belongs not just to a lost culture, but to a lost sky. You find a place to sit at the very edge of the wall. From here, the drop is steep, the ground below hidden in shadow. The wind rises and falls, brushing past your face like the turning of a page. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere in the stone beneath you, the slow hum is still there, so faint it could be mistaken for your own heartbeat. You imagine it as the memory of the earth itself, vibrating through the work of those who built here. For a long while, you stay there, letting the quiet stretch out. No one rushes you here. The stones will not move on without you. This is their gift, the chance to feel time differently, to see that there is no hurry to reach the end of the story. Some truth can only be felt slowly, in layers, the way light changes over the course of a day. When you finally stand, the horizon has gone dark except for a thin line of fading gold. The plateau is almost entirely in shadow now, the last traces of sunlight slipping from the tallest column. You begin to walk back toward the center, your footsteps echoing in the open space. The air is cooler still, and the scent of moisture is stronger. Rain may come tonight. Before leaving the far edge, you glance back at the wall, its outline now little more than a shape against the sky. It feels less like an object and more like a boundary, not one meant to keep things out, but one meant to hold something in. You don't know what that something is. You're not sure you ever will. But you know it is still here, as patient as the stones themselves. The path ahead will lead deeper into the mystery, not through the stones we can see, but through the stories they have inspired and the traces they have left in memory. Folklore, myth, whispered histories. The human voice reaching across the centuries, trying to fill the silence that stone will not. Tonight, the platform rests, and the first drops of rain begin to fall, soft as whispers on the ancient rock. The rain begins lightly, almost as if it's testing the air, each drop landing on the warm stone with a faint dark bloom before vanishing. You walk slowly across the platform, letting the sound guide you, a soft, irregular tapping that seems to echo off the columns and walls, filling the space without ever becoming loud. The scent of the earth rises, mingling with the sharper, cleaner smell of wet stone. You tilt your face upward, feeling the cool touch of the droplets. It feels cleansing, not just for the air but for the mind, like the way a question sometimes feels lighter after it's been spoken aloud. The stars dim behind a thin veil of cloud, but the horizon still holds a faint glow from the last of the day's light. You move toward the higher end of the platform, where the wind pushes the rain in gentle waves across the stone. The surface glistens now, the seams between the massive blocks catching the water and holding it in fine dark lines. They look almost like writing, an unknown script drawn in rain, and for a moment you imagine the platform as a great page, the water revealing something that is normally hidden. This thought draws you toward the idea of alignment again, not just with the sky, but with the cycles of the earth itself. You've heard it said that many ancient sites are not simply placed at random, but are connected through a web of geography, astronomy, and something less tangible. Call it energy, call it intention. Baalbek, with its immense foundations and its view over the surrounding land, feels like it could be a node in such a network. The Roman temple may have claimed the site, but perhaps the choice was not theirs alone. Perhaps it was already significant long before they arrived. You stand at the northern edge, gazing into the darkness where the hills rise like sleeping animals. The rain softens to a mist here, carried sideways by the wind. You breathe it in and think of the people that must have stood here before. The Romans in their robes and armour, yes, but also those earlier ones, the builders of the trilithon and the platform beneath. Did they stand here in the rain, watching the horizon, waiting for something to appear? A star, a shadow, a signal. Theories abound, of course. Some scholars suggest the platform was once an ancient observatory, used to track the movements of the sun, moon, and certain bright stars. Others dismiss that idea, saying the alignments are coincidental. But coincidence feels like too small a word here. The sheer precision of the work suggests intention, whether for the gods, for the heavens, or for something entirely different. You step back from the edge and walk along the wall, your hand brushing the wet surface. The texture is different now, cooler, smoother in places where the rain has washed away the dust. You think of how many times these stones have been rained on over the centuries, and how little that has changed them. Water wears mountains down to sand, but here the blocks stand almost as they did when they were first placed. The rain grows slightly stronger, and you take shelter beneath one of the surviving archways. From here, you can see the central courtyard, the scattered fragments of columns and capitals glistening in the dim light. You imagine the courtyard filled again, torches burning, voices chanting, the sound of sandals slapping against the wet stone. The rain would have fallen then too, though perhaps the temple's roof sheltered parts of it. You wonder if the original builders of the foundation knew this kind of weather, or if their climate was different, the skies clearer, the seasons shifting in other patterns. The thought draws you into the deeper history of the land itself. Civilizations rise and fall, but the earth changes more slowly, reshaping over thousands of years. The plateau of Baalbek may have looked very different in its earliest days. Rivers flowing in other courses, forests standing where now there is open ground, the sky itself showing stars in slightly different positions. The builders may have been working not just with stone, but with a landscape we would barely recognize now. You close your eyes and try to picture it. The air is drier, the light sharper. There is no Roman temple yet, only the vast flat surface of the platform, perhaps surrounded by smaller structures or markers aligned with the horizon. The people here move with purpose, not hurried, but deliberate. They carry tools, but not the kind you expect. You see frames of wood, perhaps ropes, perhaps something that glints faintly in the sun, metal, but not like the iron or bronze you know. And there's a sense, hard to describe, that they are working in harmony with the land, not against it. When you open your eyes again, the rain has eased to a fine drizzle. You step back into the open and begin walking toward the center of the platform. These stones are slick beneath your feet, but they grip enough to keep you steady. The rain pools in shallow depressions, and you see your reflection there. A faint, wavering image framed by the massive blocks around you. You think about how many reflections these stones have held. Faces from centuries apart, all standing in the same place, looking down at themselves and up at the same sky. You pause at the trilithon once more. In the wet, their surfaces are darker, their edges sharper. They look less like cut stone and more like the side of a mountain, revealed by some ancient shift in the earth. You rest your palm against the middle block, feeling the coolness seep into your skin. There is no vibration now, or perhaps the rain has softened it, but the weight is still there. Not just physical, but temporal. These stones are heavy with time. The rain begins to fade completely, leaving only the fresh smell of wet earth and stone. The clouds thin, and through a break you see the moon. Pale, blurred, but bright enough to throw a faint light across the platform. The wet stones catch it and send it back in silver glints. For a moment, the entire site feels alive, as if the stones are breathing with the rhythm of the earth beneath them. You think of all the different explanations people have offered for this place. The scholars with their measured theories, the storytellers with their giants and gods, the quiet voices who suggest connections between far-flung ancient sites. They all circle the same mystery, touching it from different angles but never quite grasping it whole. Perhaps that is as it should be. Some places are meant to remain questions, their answers too large to fit into words. Standing there in the cool night air, you feel the truth of that. The rain has washed the dust from the surface, but not from the history. The story here is layered too deeply, woven into the stone in ways we may never be able to untangle. And maybe, just maybe, the point is not to untangle it at all, but to stand here, to listen, and to let the presence of the place work on you the way it has worked on countless others, quietly, patiently, without forcing an ending. The moonlight grows stronger, and the stones seem to glow from within. You take one last slow breath, the air cool and clean in your lungs, and begin to walk toward the far side of the platform. The night is far from over, and somewhere ahead the oldest parts of the site still wait, unseen in the darkness, holding their secrets in silence until you are ready to hear them. The moon has climbed higher now, clearing the last of the drifting clouds. Its light pours over the platform in soft silver, tracing the edges of the stones and throwing long, deliberate shadows across the ground. The air feels lighter after the rain, almost delicate, carrying with it the faint smell of damp grass from the hills below. Each step you take sends a muted echo into the night, the sound rolling away until it disappears in the open distance. This is the hour when the missing records come to mind, the absences in the archives that no one seems able to explain. You walk toward the far end of the site, where the walls curve slightly, creating a kind of sheltered alcove. Here, it is easy to imagine scrolls once stored, stone tablets stacked, or records carved directly into the walls. But there is nothing. The Romans left inscriptions in many of their great works, carefully noting the emperor's name, the year, the purpose of the construction. Here, such markings are sparse, and where they exist, they speak only of the later additions. The deeper you look into the history of Baalbek, the more you notice the gaps. Travellers in the Middle Ages describe the stones in passing, marvelling at their size but offering no details of their origin. Some of those accounts survive, written in old script that requires careful translation. Others exist only in fragments, a page missing from the manuscript, a citation to a text that has never been found. It's as if the record was frayed on purpose, the loose ends cut away before they could be tied together. You pause at the wall, letting your hand rest on the cool surface. The stone has no opinion about its own history. It simply is. But you can't help thinking about the people who decided what should be remembered and what should be forgotten. In every age, there are those who keep the official record and those who decide which pieces of the story are worth preserving. Sometimes the omissions are innocent, the result of neglect, accident, or disaster. Other times they are deliberate, born from the desire to control a narrative or to erase inconvenient truths. In the archives of certain old cities there are hints that more was once known about Baalbek, references to drawings now lost, measurements no longer found in any surviving text. You imagine a room lined with wooden shelves, scrolls carefully arranged, the smell of parchment and ink heavy in the air. Perhaps those scrolls were destroyed in war or burned during some later rebuilding. Or perhaps they were hidden, taken far away, locked in a private collection where only a few eyes would ever see them again. The moonlight catches on a chipped corner of the wall, pulling you back to the present. You crouch to examine it. The break is old, its surface weathered smooth. There are faint marks here, not letters, but shallow lines that seem too deliberate to be random. They could be tool marks, or they could be the remnants of some carving long since erased by time. You trace them lightly with your fingers, knowing you'll never be certain which they are. You move along the wall, thinking of the patterns of forgetting. In some places, the oldest stories survive in myth, altered, exaggerated, but still carrying the echo of the original truth. In others, even the myth is gone, leaving only the physical evidence. Baalbek seems to sit between the two. It has its legends, passed down through the generations, and it has the stones themselves, mute but undeniable. But the bridge between them, the record that could confirm or challenge the stories, is missing. You remember reading about an early 19th century expedition here, led by a team of scholars and engineers. They measured, sketched, and catalogued what they saw, but their notes on the lower foundation stones were brief, almost dismissive. Their focus was on the Roman remains, the columns and the carvings, the parts that fit neatly into the known timeline. It's as if the older, larger blocks were an inconvenience, a problem better left unexamined. Perhaps that is part of the reason the gaps remain. To acknowledge them fully would be to admit that our timeline may be incomplete, that there are chapters missing from the book of human history. And missing chapters invite speculation, which can be dangerous in the realm of archaeology, where reputations are built on certainty. The wind stirs, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves from somewhere below the platform. You follow it to another corner where the wall meets a series of smaller stones. Here, the difference in workmanship is stark. The giant blocks below, perfectly fitted, and the more irregular work above. The shift in style is like a visual pause in the story, a place where two voices overlap but do not speak the same language. You stand there for a while, thinking about the lives of the people who once knew this place well enough to tell its full story. Not just the builders, but the record keepers, the scribes, the priests, the elders who passed on what they had learned. Did they suspect their knowledge would fade? Did they take steps to protect it? Or did they believe, as many do, that their world would last forever, that there would always be someone to remember? The moon slips behind a cloud, and the shadows deepen. In the darkness, the wall feels taller, the stones heavier. You take a step back, your eyes adjusting, and the outlines blur until the structure becomes a single massive silhouette against the sky. It's in moments like this that you understand how easily something can pass from known to unknown. All it takes is a little darkness, a little time, and the details begin to fade. The cloud drifts on, and the moonlight returns. You walk back toward the center of the platform, your mind still on the missing records. You think about how history is often written, not as a complete account, but as a tapestry woven from what survives. The missing threads are either ignored or replaced with guesses that, over time, harden into accepted fact. Perhaps the truth about Baalbek is still out there, hidden in some archive or buried in the earth beneath the platform. Perhaps it was never written down at all, passed only from voice to voice until the voices fell silent. Either way, the stones themselves remain, their surfaces holding the same quiet they have held for centuries. At the center of the site, you pause and look around. The moon is high now, its light touching every wall, every broken column. The silence feels complete, but not empty. It's the silence of a story still unfolding, one that has been paused for a very long time. You take a slow breath, the cool night air filling your lungs, and for a moment you feel as though you are part of that story, standing in the space between what was remembered and what was forgotten. Somewhere ahead, the questions will grow sharper. You will reach the place where the absence of answers is itself a kind of clue, where the very act of forgetting might have been intentional. But for now, you stand beneath the moon, the stones around you gleaming like the pages of a book that refuses to open, and you let the quiet speak for itself. The wind changes sometime after midnight. It comes in steady from the west now, carrying with it a coolness that slips between the stones and through the narrow passages of the ruins. You feel it brush against your skin as you walk, and you sense, though you cannot prove, that it has moved like this across the platform for centuries, touching the same edges, running along the same walls. The air is cleaner after the rain, and the moonlight feels sharper, catching every wet gleam on the stone. Tonight, the silence feels different. Not the calm, neutral quiet you've known since you arrived, but something more deliberate, as if the site itself is listening. And in that awareness comes the thought you've been circling for days now. Perhaps some of this silence was chosen. The idea of suppression in history is not new. Empires have always reshaped the past to suit the present. Records are rewritten, monuments rededicated, old gods renamed or buried. Sometimes this is done to legitimize power, sometimes to erase the memory of rivals, and sometimes simply because the truth does not fit the story a ruler wishes to tell. Standing here, beneath the high moon and the shadows of Baalbek's walls, you cannot help but feel that something like this may have happened here. You think of the Roman temple above and the massive foundation beneath. The empire was practical. They reused what they found, adapting old sites to their own purposes. But why keep the lower stones at all? If they were inconvenient to the new design, they could have been dismantled, replaced, reshaped. Instead, the Romans built on them, covering them with their own work but never erasing them. Was it because they couldn't move them? Or because they didn't dare? Perhaps the older structure had meaning, spiritual, strategic, or both, that even the Romans respected. But perhaps, too, they chose not to speak of it in their records, the same way they ignored certain histories in other lands they conquered. There is power in silence. Sometimes leaving something unexplained is more effective than explaining it in a way that invites questions. You walk toward the western wall where the trilithon rests. The moonlight makes the great stones look almost metallic, their surfaces shining in silver tones. You run your hand along the base of one block, tracing its cold, perfect join with the next. Here, in the hush of the night, it is easy to imagine a council of men in Rome deciding what would be remembered and what would be left out. The foundation stones, too large and too strange, might have been considered dangerous in the wrong kind of story. Better to let them be swallowed into the background, part of the scenery but never the headline. You recall a phrase from a historian's work, something about interpreting the ancient in service to the present. It comes back to you now like a shadow. Interpretation can be a form of control. By defining the story, you also define what questions are worth asking. And by setting certain subjects aside, you train generations to look elsewhere. The suppression might not have been deliberate in the conspiratorial sense. It might have been more subtle, born of habit and convenience. The Romans knew what they valued, their own engineering, their gods, their order. The foundation may have been a curiosity to them, but it was not Roman, and therefore not essential to the story they wanted to tell. And so, it faded into the background. But stories do not vanish entirely. You think again of the local legends, giants, first people, gods from the sky. Folklore often preserves what official records ignore. Over time, facts can dissolve into symbols, but even symbols carry meaning. Perhaps the legends are the survival of an older truth, reshaped for the ears of those who could not be told the whole thing. A gust of wind sweeps along the wall, bringing with it a faint sound, a creak, a shift, something deep within the structure. You pause, listening, but it fades quickly. Maybe it was nothing more than stone settling, or the wind finding a new path. Still, it feels like a reminder that these walls are not dead things. They move, however slowly, and they remember in ways we cannot. You move along the trailathon until you reach the corner, then follow the outer wall toward the south. The platform is quiet here, shielded from the wind, and the air is warmer. You stop and look back across the site, the columns and broken arches casting long shadows in the moonlight. From this angle, the Roman work dominates the view. The massive foundation stones are hidden from sight unless you know where to look. It is a visual metaphor for the history itself. The Roman story is the one on display. The older story is beneath it, supporting it, unseen by most. You imagine the process of rewriting, a scribe at his desk, copying an official account of the temple's construction. The foundation is mentioned briefly, perhaps described as part of the natural rock or the work of an earlier Roman phase. No great effort is made to distinguish it from the rest. The important details are about the columns, the statues, the ceremonies, the parts of the site that are recognizably Roman. The rest is left in the shadows. And yet, despite the omissions, the stones themselves remain. They're too large to be removed, too solid to crumble away. In a sense, they defy the attempt to hide them. Even without an official record, they speak for themselves to those willing to walk the platform slowly, to look down instead of only up. You stop beneath one of the smaller arches, the stone cool against your back. The night is quiet except for the occasional sigh of the wind. You think about how suppression and survival often exist together. Erasing something entirely is difficult. More often, it is simply covered over, its presence disguised. The Roman temple did that to the foundation, not erasing it, but wrapping it in another story. And perhaps that is why it still speaks to those who come here. The moon begins to drift lower, its light angling in a way that makes the seams in the lower stones gleam faintly. You trace one with your eyes, following it until it disappears into shadow. It occurs to you that suppression works in the same way. It does not destroy the seam between stories, but it makes it harder to see. Only when the light shifts, when perspective changes, do the lines become clear again. You take a slow breath, letting the cool night air fill your lungs. Somewhere ahead in your journey, the official explanations will fall away entirely, leaving only possibilities. But for now, you stand here, aware of both the story that has been told and the one that has been quieted. The stones hold them both, without choosing between them. You step back into the open, the sky vast above you. The stars have shifted slightly, the constellations turning in their slow, patient arcs. The wind eases, and the silence grows deep again. In that silence, you feel the weight of all that has been left unsaid, not as an absence, but as a presence in its own right. The platform is as it has always been, the stone, the shadow, the silence. And somewhere within that silence the truth waits, unchanged, for the day we are ready to hear it. The wind has gone still by the time you reach the center of the platform again. Without its movement, the night feels heavier, as though the air itself is listening. The moon hangs low now, casting a softer light, and the shadows between the stones are deeper, their edges less certain. You pause, taking in the quiet. It is here, in this kind of stillness, that you notice things you might otherwise miss. The way the surface of the stone cools unevenly after the rain, the faint gleam where water still lingers in the smallest depressions, the almost imperceptible shift in the air temperature when you step from one part of the platform to another. You move toward the western side again, drawn by something you can't name. Perhaps it's the trilithon calling you back, or perhaps it's simply the way the light falls there at this hour. The massive stones rest in silence, their weight pressing down into the earth. You place your palm against the middle block and close your eyes. The stone is cool, but beneath that coolness there is a subtle vibration, so faint you wonder if it is only the echo of your own pulse. You focus on it, breathing slowly, letting the rhythm of your heart slow to match it. The feeling is not sound exactly, nor is it movement. It's more like standing near a great bell just after it has been struck, the air still trembling, the metal holding a note too low to hear but not too low to feel. You keep your hand there, your eyes closed, and imagine the entire platform as a kind of instrument, the stones set to resonate with forces we no longer measure. Ancient builders in other lands are known to have understood the acoustic properties of stone. Some temples hum when the wind passes through them. Certain chambers echo in ways that amplify a human voice far beyond its normal range. Others focus sound so precisely that a whisper can be heard clearly from dozens of meters away. Could Baalbek have been shaped with similar intent? If the lower platform predates the Roman work, perhaps its builders knew how to harness not just the strength of stone, but its voice. You think of the local legends again, the hum heard by shepherds on certain nights, the uneasy stirring of their flocks. If such a sound exists, it may not come from wind or from any visible motion. It could be something deeper, a vibration travelling through the ground, through the massive blocks, through the very bedrock beneath. The thought makes the place feel even older, as if it is connected to the earth in ways beyond the reach of our current understanding. You step back from the wall and sit on a smaller block nearby. From here, you can see the line of the trilithon stretching out in both directions, each stone catching the moonlight along its upper edge. You let your gaze rest there, imagining what it would take to make something like this. Not just the physical act of moving the stones, but the planning, the knowledge, the purpose behind it. In our time, we measure such feats in technical terms: engineering capacity, manpower, logistics. But what if the builders thought in other terms entirely? What if they understood stone as something alive, something that could be persuaded rather than forced into place? In certain traditions, stone is seen as a keeper of memory, absorbing the presence of those who work it and those who walk upon it. If that's true, then Baalbek is not just a ruin. It's a vast archive, holding impressions of every life that has passed here. You imagine those impressions layered within the blocks, the laughter of workers, the commands of overseers, the quiet moments of someone pausing to rest a hand on the same spot where yours rests now. The night deepens, and the sky above you grows more crowded with stars. You tilt your head back, tracing the patterns you know and wondering what the sky looked like when these stones were first placed. Over thousands of years the constellations shift, their positions drifting slowly in the great cycle of the heavens. If the builders aligned this platform to certain stars, those alignments might point to a date far older than the Roman occupation. That possibility has been raised before, though rarely with certainty. Alignments are easy to suggest and harder to prove. Still, the idea lingers. You picture the platform without the Roman columns, open to the sky, its edges catching the first light of dawn or the last light of sunset in precise, measured ways. Perhaps the hum you felt beneath your hand is connected to that. A resonance tied to the turning of the earth, the movement of the sun and moon, the pull of unseen forces. A faint sound interrupts your thoughts, the flutter of wings. A bird startled from its roost cuts across the sky and disappears into the darkness. The moment reminds you that this place, for all its mystery, is still part of the living world. The stones may be ancient, but they share their space with the same wind, the same sky, the same creatures that move through our own days. You rise and walk slowly along the length of the wall, feeling the texture of each block as you pass. Some are smoother than others, their surfaces worn by centuries of touch. Others still bear the faint marks of tools, though the edges are softened now. You wonder if those marks belong to the original builders or to later hands that tried, unsuccessfully, to alter the stones. At the far end, you stop and look back across the platform. The moonlight creates a soft gradient from shadow to brightness, making the site look less like a ruin and more like a sleeping city. The silence here is thick, but not oppressive. It feels full, as if every stone is holding something just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment, or the right listener to release it. You think again of the idea that the platform might have been tuned to the Earth itself. Modern science has shown that the planet produces natural vibrations, some of them so low that they are more felt than heard. If the builders of Baalbek knew this, they could have shaped the site to interact with those frequencies, amplifying them or channeling them in specific ways. Such knowledge would seem extraordinary to us now, but it might have been ordinary to them, passed down through generations until it was no longer needed or no longer understood. The night air is cool against your face, and you take a slow breath, letting it fill you completely before you release it. The stones, the shadow, the silence. The refrain comes back to you again, steady and unbroken. You realize now that the hum you felt beneath your hand is part of that refrain, a fourth element that cannot be spoken but only experienced. You begin to walk back toward the center, each step deliberate, the sound of your footfall merging with the quiet. The platform feels alive in its stillness, as if it is aware of your presence and content to let you stay a while longer. The mystery here is not one that demands urgency. It invites patience, as though the stones know they will outlast every question we bring to them. When you reach the center, you stop and look up at the sky one last time before the moon dips lower. The constellations are shifting, the night moving forward as it always does, and you understand that whatever this place was meant to do, whether to watch the heavens, to hum with the earth, or to hold something sacred, it is still doing it, quietly, unseen, unchanged. Somewhere ahead, the story will move into the realm of connections, how this place fits into a wider pattern of ancient sites, each with its own silence, its own hum. But tonight, Baalbek stands alone beneath the stars, its voice too deep for words, its purpose hidden in plain sight. The night feels endless here, as if the plateau itself has stepped outside the hours. The moon drifts lower, and the light shifts from silver to a paler, almost translucent white. You begin to walk again, tracing the edges of the platform, but now your mind is not on Baalbek alone. It drifts outward, following invisible lines that connect this place to others across the world. From the first moment you laid your hand on the trilithon, you felt it, the familiarity, not because you had been here before, but because you had seen echoes of these stones in other lands, in other ruins. Puma Punku in Bolivia, with its massive blocks carved interlock like puzzle pieces. The megaliths of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, each stone fitted so precisely that not even a knife blade could slip between them. The base of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, with its own titanic foundation stones, each placed as if they had grown there. Nan Madol in the Pacific, its walls made from colossal basalt logs rising directly from the sea. Different continents, different cultures, and yet the same defiance of scale, the same quiet mastery of stone. You pause at the southern wall, gazing into the darkness beyond. The air here smells faintly of pine from the higher slopes, and the night is still enough that you can hear your own breathing. It's a good place to think about the pattern, the way the largest, most impossible works seem to come not at the end of a civilization's story, but at its beginning. Over time, the stones get smaller, the workmanship more familiar. It's as if humanity starts with greatness, then forgets how to repeat it. In the orthodox view, these similarities are coincidences, different peoples, each using their own resources and ingenuity to solve similar problems. And perhaps that's true. Humans everywhere need to move stone, to build walls, to raise monuments. But the part that lingers in your mind is not the purpose, it's the precision. Not just that the stones are large, but that they are set in place with a level of accuracy that challenges even modern methods. You think of how some of these sites share more than just techniques. Certain alignments to the solstices, to specific stars, appear again and again, as though the builders were working from the same celestial map. Others use similar geometric ratios, echoing proportions that show up in monuments thousands of miles apart. And in the shadows of all of them, there are stories of gods who came from the sky, of beings who taught the first people how to shape the world, of lost ages when the earth was different. The idea of a shared origin, of a civilization before history, has always been controversial. Without physical evidence, it remains speculation, dismissed by most scholars. Yet the stones themselves stand as a kind of physical evidence, even if their meaning is unclear. They're too stubborn to vanish, too massive to ignore. And the more you see of them, the more you notice the same signature, the refusal to conform to what we think was possible at the time. You continue along the wall until you reach a spot where the ground falls away sharply. The valley below is dark, but you can see the faint gleam of water far off, reflecting the moon. You imagine standing here centuries ago, before the town below existed, before the fields were cut into squares. The view would have been wide and unobstructed, the stars brighter, the silence deeper. If someone had wanted to connect this place to another across the world, the sky would have been their map, the earth, their line. There are researchers who believe such connections existed, not through trade or conquest, but through a shared inheritance of knowledge. They speak of a time before the great flood myths found in so many cultures, when a people, or perhaps many peoples, had mastered the art of working with the earth on a scale we no longer attempt. When the catastrophe came, whether by water, fire, or something else, that world ended. What survived were fragments, scattered techniques, scattered stories, scattered stones. Baalbek could be one of those fragments. Perhaps it was a node in a network, a station on a map we can no longer read. Its purpose might have been spiritual, astronomical, practical, or all three at once. In many ancient traditions, those distinctions did not exist. To watch the stars was a spiritual act. To measure the land was a way of honouring the gods. To build in harmony with the earth was as practical as it was sacred. You step back from the wall, your eyes following the arc of the moon as it drifts lower toward the mountains. In your mind, the stones of Baalbek are no longer alone. They are part of a chain that stretches across oceans and continents, each link different in form but alike in intent. The same silence lives in them, the same unyielding patience. The thought fills you with a strange calm. If there is a pattern, it means we are not simply looking at isolated mysteries, but at pieces of a larger whole. Even if we can't yet see the full picture, we can feel its shape. The human mind has always been drawn to patterns, to constellations in the sky, to rhythm in music, to symmetry in art. Perhaps this instinct is not just about finding beauty, but about remembering something we once knew. The wind stirs again, light and cool. It moves along the stones as though tracing their outlines, whispering across their edges. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the same wind crossing the walls of Sacsayhuaman, sliding along the basalt of Nan Madol, curling through the cut stones of Pumapunku. Different air, different oceans, and yet the same feeling. When you open your eyes again, the night is quieter still. The town below has gone to sleep, its last lights dimmed. The plateau is yours alone. You walk slowly back toward the centre, your footsteps the only sound. As you pass the trilithon, you lay your hand on the middle block one more time. The vibration is still there, faint and steady like a heartbeat buried deep within the stone. It's tempting to think of it as an answer, proof that the stones are more than they seem. But perhaps it's something simpler, a reminder that the earth itself is alive, and that the builders knew how to listen to it. If that knowledge was shared once, it could have been shared across the world, carried in the minds of travellers, encoded in the designs of places like this. You pause in the centre of the platform and look up. The stars have shifted again, the slow turn of the night drawing new shapes. You wonder how many times this exact sky has passed over these stones, how many thousands of nights have unfolded in silence here. The scale of it makes your own life feel small, but not in a way that diminishes you. Rather, it feels like being part of something vast, something that does not need to end simply because we have forgotten its beginning. You take a final breath of the cool night air and let it settle inside you. The stones, the shadow, the silence. Now, perhaps, another word joins them, the connection. Baalbek is not alone. It never was. And somewhere, in the spaces between the ruins of the world, the pattern still waits to be remembered. Dawn is still far away, but the eastern sky has begun to pale, not with light, but with the faint loosening of the darkness, as if the night is preparing to hand its place to the day. The air is cool and carries a scent from the fields below, a mixture of damp soil and distant wood smoke. You walk slowly toward the northern edge of the platform where the ground drops away steeply, and from here you can see the faint outlines of clustered rooftops far below. It is here, away from the central courtyards and columns, that the voices of the living past are strongest. These are not the voices of historians or scholars. They are the voices of the people who have lived in the shadow of Baalbek for generations. Farmers, shepherds, traders, and elders who learn the stories from those before them. You've heard fragments already, passed to you in casual conversation, or overheard at the edge of the site. Now, standing here, you let those fragments return, layering themselves into something whole. The locals speak of a time before the Romans, before even the oldest empires known to history. They speak of the Awalin, the first ones, a people who arrived in an age when the sky was different, who built the great platform as the base for a palace or a place of worship, or some say for something that could move between the earth and the heavens. These first ones were not like us, the stories say. They were taller, stronger, and their years were counted not in decades but in centuries. Some tell the legend of Camarine, the twin moons. In the days of the first ones, the sky held two moons, one larger and brighter, the other smaller, paler, but just as constant. The platform was built to mark the dance of these moons, to measure the cycles when their paths crossed in the night sky. Then, the story says, the smaller moon fell, breaking the world. The seas rose, the air turned dark, and the age of the first ones ended. What remained was this platform, too solid even for the catastrophe to erase. Others speak of the prophet King Nimrod, who defied heaven and sought to build a tower that would pierce the sky. In some versions, Baalbek is that tower, or the foundation of it, its upper levels destroyed by divine force. In others, Nimrod only passed through here, ordering the construction of the platform as a resting place for his armies. The giant stones, the legend says, were laid in a single night by spirits bound to his command. And then there is the quieter story, told not in grand declarations, but in the soft voice of an old woman at her door. She says the stones hum because they are dreaming, that when the wind moves just right, it carries the dreams of the first ones across the hills. Those who hear it in their sleep wake with strange visions of a world both older and newer than our own, where the stars are close enough to touch and the stones themselves are alive. You stand there for a long time, letting the voices of these stories settle into you. They're not concerned with dates or measurements, they're concerned with meaning. To the people here, the platform is not just a ruin, it is a presence, something that has always been here, as much a part of the land as the mountains or the rivers. Even without written records, the place has kept its hold on memory. You recall something a young man in the village said earlier in your visit. The stones know who you are when you step on them. You had smiled at the time, thinking it was just a poetic turn of phrase. Now, after nights spent walking this platform, you're not so sure it was only poetry. The feeling of being watched, not in a threatening way, but in a way that notes your presence, has been constant since you arrived. You leave the northern wall and walk back toward the centre, your footsteps soft in the damp air. The Roman columns rise ahead, their shadows long in the moonlight. It's strange to think how new they are compared to the stones beneath them. To the people of the surrounding land, the Romans are part of the story, but only a part, an episode in a much longer narrative that belongs first to the first ones, and then to all who have lived in their shadow. Some of the stories blend Roman and pre-Roman worlds. There is a tale of a Roman soldier who deserted his post and fled into the hills, only to return years later, changed. He claimed to have met the descendants of the first ones deep in the mountains, people who still knew the old ways of stone. They taught him to hear the hum of the earth, to read the messages in the shifting shadows on the platform. When he returned to Baalbek, he worked for years on the temple above, placing each column, so its shadow would fall exactly where the old platform's markings dictated. You think about how easily such a story could be dismissed by anyone seeking hard evidence. Yet, standing here in the quiet, it feels no less real than the chisel marks you've traced with your fingers. Stories survive because they matter, even if they can't be proven. And sometimes they survive because the stones themselves seem to ask for them. At the edge of the central courtyard, you pause. The rain from earlier has left the stones slick, and in the reflected moonlight you see something that catches your attention. A faint, curved groove in the floor, so shallow it would be easy to miss. You crouch, tracing it with your fingertips. It feels deliberate, though you can't tell if it's part of the Roman work or something older. For a moment you imagine it as a marker, part of a larger pattern carved into the platform. Perhaps a map, perhaps a record, perhaps a guide for something that no longer exists. The wind picks up again, moving across the stones in a slow, even breath. You listen, and for an instant you think you hear it. The hum the shepherds speak of, low and steady, like the faint echo of a distant drum. It fades as quickly as it came, leaving only the whisper of air and the soft rustle of your own clothing. When you rise, you look around the platform once more. It feels different after hearing the old stories in your mind. The Roman ruins, the massive foundation, the long stretch of history between them, all of it is part of a single whole, a place where the past has not vanished but simply changed its voice. The columns speak in one language, the stones in another, and the people in yet another still. As you walk toward the eastern side, the sky above it is lightening, the first faint suggestion of dawn. The night is ending, but the stories you've gathered feel as if they've only just begun to speak. You carry them with you, not as answers, but as companions. Here, in the silence of Baalbek, the past is not gone. It is simply waiting, held in stone, carried in voices, ready to meet anyone who walks here slowly enough to listen. The eastern sky has begun to soften now, not with colour yet, but with the faintest loosening of night's grip. The stars fade one by one, as if retreating into the deeper darkness beyond sight. The air feels stiller than before, as though the earth is holding its breath. You move to the highest point of the platform and look east, where the horizon is a dark line against the barely shifting sky. This is the moment, you sense, when the purpose of a place like this would have been revealed. Ancient sites across the world often wake with the sun. Their alignments are not accidents. They mark solstices, equinoxes, the rising of particular stars. You wonder if Baalbek is the same. The Roman temple above is known to face the rising sun on certain days, but what about the older stones beneath? What would they reveal if the platform were bare, open, free of later additions? You picture it in your mind, the massive foundation stretching unbroken to its edges, each line of stone perfectly squared to the points of the compass. Perhaps on certain days of the year, the first light would have run like a blade along the seam between two blocks. Or maybe it would have struck a single point, a carved marker now lost, or a stone chamber buried beneath. These possibilities feel close, as if the site itself wants you to imagine them. The sky grows lighter, and a pale blue begins to creep into the black. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere below, in the valley, a rooster calls, breaking the stillness. A moment later, another answers from farther away. You can hear the faint shifting of leaves as a light breeze stirs them. But beneath those sounds, you think you hear something deeper. The low hum again, steadier now, as though the approach of the sun awakens it. Your mind drifts to the idea that this hum is not accidental. The massive stones, with their incredible density, might resonate naturally when the temperature changes. As the cool of night yields to the first warmth of day, the blocks could expand slightly, imperceptibly, sending a vibration through their length. To the builders, such a phenomenon would have been more than physics. It would have been the Earth's own greeting to the dawn. In the myths of this region, dawn is often a moment of passage, the hour when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The old stories tell of watchers who stood on high places to greet the first light, not only as worship but as communication. They believed the sun carried messages, that its light was a living thing, able to touch both the seen and the unseen. The first edge of gold appears on the horizon. It is so faint you almost miss it. A delicate thread of light that slowly swells, pressing back the blue. You find yourself standing straighter, as though some old instinct is waking in you too. The light rises, spilling across the hills, and then, there it is. The first beam touches the platform. It strikes not at random but along a clear line formed by the upper stones of the eastern wall. You see how the seam between two blocks becomes a glowing line, thin but sharp, as though the light is running a blade between them. Your breath catches. If this alignment is intentional, and you suspect it is, then the builders knew precisely where the sun would rise at this point in the year, and they set their stones to meet it. The light grows, reaching farther into the platform. You turn slowly, watching how it moves, not flooding the space all at once, but slipping between the stones, touching certain surfaces first, leaving others in shadow. You imagine the builders watching this same effect thousands of years ago, noting the way the shadows fell, marking the days by the sun's progress. As the light reaches the trilithon, you see something you hadn't noticed before. One edge of the central block catches the sun at an angle that makes its surface gleam as if polished. The wetness from the earlier rain magnifies the effect, making the stone almost mirror-like. For a moment it feels as if the block is sending the light back, not in a straight reflection, but diffused, as though carrying it inward into the mass of stone itself. This is the kind of detail you could walk past 100 times without seeing. But now, in this early hour, you feel as though you are witnessing the sight as it was meant to be seen, in motion, alive with the turning of the earth. It's not just a static monument. It's a participant in the rhythm of day and night, in the cycle of the seasons. You think about the other ancient places that respond to the sun in similar ways. The passage tomb of Newgrange in Ireland, which fills with light only at the winter solstice. The temple of Abu Simbel in Egypt, where the rising sun illuminates specific statues twice a year. The great circle of Stonehenge, where the summer solstice sunrise aligns perfectly with its heelstone. These places are spread across the world, built by cultures that never knew one another, yet all share the same reverence for the sun's path, the same precision in their alignments. The question returns, did these builders share knowledge? Or is the urge to shape stone in harmony with the heavens simply something deep in the human mind, arising again and again in different lands? You find yourself leaning toward the first idea, though you cannot prove it. The similarities are too precise, too deliberate to feel like chance. The sun rises higher now, and the platform warms beneath your feet. The hum has faded into the general sounds of morning. Birds calling from the hills, the occasional bark of a dog from the town below. But you can still feel it, as if it has settled into you. In this light, Baalbek looks almost new. The shadows are short and sharp. The columns stand in bright relief against the sky, and the massive foundation seems even more solid, as if it could stand another 1,000 years without change. You understand now why the people here say the stones remember. They do not just hold the past. They meet each new day with the same attention, the same alignment, the same readiness to be part of the world's turning. You take a step back, letting your eyes sweep across the whole of the platform. The day has begun, and with it comes the ordinary life of the town, the market opening, the streets filling with footsteps, the sound of carts on stone. But here, in this high place, the morning still feels sacred. You think of the generations who stood here before you, the first builders, the Romans, the farmers who wandered up in later centuries, the travellers who came in search of answers. All of them at some point must have stood in this same light, feeling the same warmth on their skin, watching the same slow rise of the sun. The thought ties you to them, not in history books or maps, but in the shared experience of simply being here, at this moment, in this place. The day will move on, and the mystery will remain. But for now you are content to stand in the light, listening to the stones, knowing that whatever their purpose was, it still breathes in the rhythm of the earth, in the hum before dawn, in the first touch of sunlight that finds them without fail. By the time the sun clears the horizon entirely, the platform is alive with light. The pale gold of early morning floods every seam between the stones, softening their weight without diminishing their presence. The wetness from last night's rain is already evaporating, and the air is filled with the clean scent of sun-warmed stone. You take a slow breath, letting the warmth settle into you. It feels like the perfect counterpoint to the deep cool of the night you've just left behind. You begin walking the perimeter one last time, letting your steps fall into the same slow rhythm they have kept through every hour you've spent here. The shadows are short now, their edges sharp and almost delicate against the massive geometry of the walls. Each block seems to hold its own shade of colour, pale cream, warm beige, almost honey gold where the sunlight lingers. This is the Baalbek most people see when they visit in daylight. Monumental, ancient, awe-inspiring. But after walking here in the deep hours, after tracing the hum in the stones and listening to the night, you see it differently. In the daylight, the mystery doesn't vanish. It simply takes on a quieter form, hiding in plain sight. The tourists who will come later today will walk across the platform, touch the stones, take photographs. Most will leave having seen only the visible grandeur. But the real depth of this place lives in the spaces between what is seen and what is felt, in the alignments, the echoes, the vibrations that slip beneath notice unless you pause long enough to feel them. You stop at the trilithon once more, the sun warming its face. In the daylight, the scale is even more astonishing. You imagine the builders standing here, tools in hand, the sun just rising behind them, casting their shadows long across the platform. Perhaps they work to this same rhythm, night giving way to morning, the light revealing the lines they would follow that day. As you stand there, you think of the journey the story has taken you on, from the first steps in the mist to the hum beneath your palm, from the absence of records to the persistence of legend, from the deep silence of the night to this bright, open morning. Every part of it feels connected, as if the sight itself has been guiding you towards something, not with answers, but with perspective. You glance toward the eastern wall where the sun first touched the platform an hour ago. The line of light that ran along the stones has faded into the general brightness, but you can still see it in your mind, sharp and perfect. It will return tomorrow and the day after, and on the same day next year. The stones will meet it every time, just as they have for countless centuries. Perhaps that is the real secret here, not some hidden chamber or lost inscription, but the act of endurance itself. The ability to hold fast through time, to keep meeting the sun in the same place, to keep telling a story without words. In that way, Baalbek is both a ruin and a living thing, a structure and a cycle. You walk toward the center of the platform and look out in every direction. The mountains rise in the distance, the valley stretches far below, and the town is beginning to stir. From here, the sounds of daily life drift up faintly. Voices calling, a distant dog barking, the slow roll of a cart over cobblestones. It feels right that the site is part of the living world, not cut off from it. The people in the valley may pass it every day without thinking about its mystery, but it still shapes their horizon. You take one last slow walk to the southern edge, where the wall drops away to the lower terraces. This sunlight here is stronger, and the warmth of the stone beneath your hand feels grounding, as if the weight of the block is lending some of its patience to you. You close your eyes and let the silence settle one more time. The refrain comes to you again, the stone, the shadow, the silence. But now there is a fourth element in your mind, the light. The light that returns without fail, the light that reveals without speaking. When you open your eyes, the day has fully arrived. You know it's time to leave, but not to end the story. Places like this are never finished. They are simply waiting for the next person to listen. You've walked these stones in darkness and in dawn. You've felt their hum and seen their alignment. You've heard their legends and imagined their beginnings. And still they remain ahead of you, holding more than any single telling can hold. As you take your final steps across the platform, you feel a quiet gratitude for the endurance of the stones, for the patience of the night, for the small, fleeting moments of connection that come when you stand still long enough to hear what has always been there. And now, as you step back into the world beyond these walls, the question lingers, the same one that has carried you from the first moment here. What else might lie hidden, waiting for us to remember? If you've walked this journey with me tonight, through the mist, through the legends, through the hum and the rising light, I invite you to keep it alive. Share this story if it spoke to you. Leave a comment with your own thoughts, or with the places that have made you feel this same quiet wonder. And if you want to journey further into the world's forgotten corners, subscribe so you can walk the next path with me. Because somewhere, under some other sky, another silence is waiting, and together we can listen.